Stay with me, billionaire or not, you need to pull through.
Black billionaire fakes a coma, what his nurse confessed nearly killed him for real. The story opens with a devastating reversal of fortune. A man who built a $4.7 billion pharmaceutical empire from a Detroit basement is now motionless and silent in a luxury hospital suite, his life hanging on his ability to deceive everyone around him. The hook lies in the dramatic irony. The reader knows Marcus is conscious and listening while his wife and business partner discuss his incapacity mere feet from his bed, unaware their victim is documenting every word of their betrayal. It immediately establishes a sense of suffocating dread. Marcus is a prisoner in his own body, trapped in a sterile room where even the medical staff has been weaponized against him, using his feigned coma as his only shield to identify who tampered with his brakes and who's now poisoning his four. The tension amplifies when Laura Bennett, his night nurse, enters with an unauthorized syringe, forcing Marcus to bet his survival on whether this stranger will become his executioner or his only ally. Marcus's consciousness returned like a tide, slow and then all at once. The fog that had wrapped around his mind for 2 days lifted, leaving behind a crystalline awareness that made every sound sharp, every sensation precise. The steady beep of monitors. The antiseptic burn in his nostrils. The dull throb radiating from his ribs where the seatbelt had nearly crushed him. He tried to open his eyes, but his body refused the command, limbs heavy as concrete. Then he heard the voices. 3 more days, maybe 4. That was Diane. His wife of 12 years, though they'd been strangers for at least 5. Her tone carried none of the concern a spouse should have. It was clinical. Calculating. The board meets Thursday. James Whitmore's voice, smooth as always. Marcus's business partner, the man he'd made wealthy beyond imagination. We need the incapacity declaration before then, or Patricia will block the vote. Marcus's pulse quickened, but the monitor beside him continued its steady rhythm. Some mercy in that, at least. Dr. Cole assured me it's just a matter of time, Diane said. The brain swelling, the trauma response, all documented. The neurologist will sign off by Wednesday at the latest. And if he wakes up? A pause. Marcus felt Diane move closer to his bed, her perfume, something new, not the scent he remembered, washing over him. Then we keep him comfortable, she said softly, until the transition is complete. The words landed like a physical blow. Keep him comfortable. Medical speak for making someone's final days painless. They weren't waiting for him to wake up. They were waiting for him to die, or near enough that it wouldn't matter. The Apex deal is worth $400 million, James continued. Split 3 ways with Cole, that's. I can do math, James. Their footsteps moved toward the door. Marcus's mind raced, 1,000 thoughts colliding. The accident hadn't been an accident. The brake failure on PCH, the cliff, the Mercedes tumbling end over end before crashing into the rocks, all of it orchestrated. And now they were finishing what they'd started, using his own injuries as cover. The door clicked shut. Silence returned, broken only by the machines keeping him alive. Marcus made his decision in that moment of quiet. He would not open his eyes. Would not speak. Would not move. He would become exactly what they believed him to be, a man hovering at death's threshold, helpless and unaware. And while they congratulated themselves on their cleverness, he would watch, listen, and remember every word. They wanted him gone. Then gone he would be. A ghost in his own body, gathering evidence of their betrayal until the moment he chose to resurrect himself. The game had changed. And Marcus Brooks had always excelled at playing the long game. Laura Bennett pushed through the door of Suite 407 at 11:15, her shift barely started and already running behind. Another nurse had called in sick, leaving the ICU short-staffed on a Saturday night. She rolled her shoulders, releasing tension that had been building since her divorce papers arrived that morning, and forced herself into the professional calm that had carried her through 15 years of critical care. The patient in 407 was a VIP case, Marcus Brooks, the pharmaceutical billionaire. Laura had read about the accident. Pacific Coast Highway, brake failure, miracle he'd survived it all. The preliminary chart showed fractured ribs, a punctured lung that had been repaired in emergency surgery, and significant head trauma that had left him comatose for 3 days. She approached the bed, studying the man beneath the sheets. Even unconscious, there was something commanding about him. Strong features, a beard showing silver at the edges, the kind of face that suggested intelligence and determination. Laura checked his vitals, noting the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, the controlled rise and fall of his chest. Then she pulled up his electronic medical records on the tablet mounted beside the bed, and her professional instincts began to sound alarms. The medication dosages were wrong. Not catastrophically wrong, but wrong enough that someone with her experience noticed immediately. He was receiving a sedative cocktail that didn't match the severity of his injuries. A patient with his trauma profile should be on a lighter regimen by day 3, allowing for gradual awakening and neurological assessment. Instead, someone had ordered a protocol that would keep him deeply unconscious. Laura scrolled further, frowning. There were gaps in the electronic records, timestamps where entries should be but weren't, medication administrations logged without corresponding physician orders. She'd seen sloppy record-keeping before, but this was different. This was deliberate. She glanced at the 4 bags hanging above Marcus's bed. 2 were standard, saline and antibiotics. The third was unlabeled except for a handwritten notation, per Dr. Cole, continue as directed. Laura's stomach tightened. In 15 years of nursing, she'd learned to trust her instincts, and every instinct she had was screaming that something was profoundly wrong in this room. She thought of another case, years ago, where a patient had deteriorated unexpectedly until an observant resident discovered a family member had been tampering with medications. That patient had died before they could prove anything. She wouldn't let that happen again. Laura looked down at Marcus Brooks, this man who'd built an empire and now lay helpless under her care, and made a silent promise. Whatever was happening here, she would figure it out. Even if it cost her the job she desperately needed, she would figure it out. Because some things mattered more than paychecks and peace of mind. Some things, like a patient's life, mattered more than everything. The hospital fell into its deepest quiet around 2 in the morning, when even the urgent energy of the emergency department downstairs seemed to pause and take a breath. Laura had finished her rounds, checked on her other patients, and found herself drawn back to Suite 407 with a folder of printed records she'd pulled from the archives. The discrepancies were worse than she'd thought. Marcus Brooks should have been showing signs of emergence from his coma by now, spontaneous eye movements, responses to stimuli, something. Instead, his neurological assessments showed a patient locked in deep sedation, unresponsive to even painful stimuli. But his brain scans told a different story. The swelling had decreased significantly. The trauma was healing. There was no medical reason for him to remain unconscious unless someone wanted him that way. Laura stood beside his bed, the only sound the rhythmic beep of monitors and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through his nasal cannula. She knew she should report her concerns through proper channels, file an incident report, contact the ethics board. But something stopped her, the memory of bureaucracy moving too slowly, of reports disappearing into administrative black holes while patients suffered. She looked at Marcus's still face and realized she was alone, truly alone, with the weight of what she'd discovered. And sometimes being alone meant you could speak truths you'd otherwise keep locked inside. Mr. Brooks, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I don't know if you can hear me, but I need to say this to someone, even if that someone can't respond. She pulled a chair closer, sitting so she could see his face clearly. Your medication regimen doesn't make sense. Someone is adding something to your 4 that isn't in your chart. The dosages, the timing, none of it matches your injuries or your recovery trajectory. She paused, searching his features for any sign of awareness, finding none. His chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity, his eyelids remaining perfectly still. I've seen this before, Laura continued, her voice catching slightly. 5 years ago, a patient in another hospital. His daughter was slowly increasing his pain medication, keeping him sedated so she could access his accounts, forge documents. By the time we realized what was happening, he'd developed pneumonia from prolonged unconsciousness. He died 3 days after we moved him. Laura stood, pacing to the window where city lights glittered against the darkness. I won't let that happen again. I don't care who's involved or why. I'm going to figure out what's happening to you, Mr. Brooks. I'm going to find out who's doing this and why. She turned back to face him, her jaw set with determination. I promise you that. Even if you never know I made this promise, even if you never wake up to hear it, I promise. Behind those closed eyelids, Marcus Brooks absorbed every word, his mind racing with a single realization that changed everything: he wasn't alone anymore. This woman, this stranger whose name he didn't even know, had just become his lifeline. The only person in this building who might actually want him to survive. Now he just had to find a way to tell her he was listening. Morning light filtered through the blinds, casting stripes across the hospital room floor. Laura returned to Suite 407 at 6 a.m., technically an hour before her shift began, but sleep had been impossible after last night's confession. She'd spent the dark hours researching, making phone calls to colleagues, pulling in favors to get additional information on Marcus Brooks's case. Now she stood beside his bed, her heart hammering as she prepared to run a series of tests she had no authorization to perform. If she was wrong, she'd look like a paranoid fool. If she was right, she was about to uncover something that could cost her far more than her nursing license. Mr. Brooks, she said quietly, beginning her assessment, I'm going to check your reflexes now. Standard procedure. She lifted his right hand, noting the warmth of his skin, the strength still evident in his fingers despite 3 days of immobility. She pressed her thumb against his palm, applying the stimulus that should produce an automatic response. Nothing. She moved to test the other hand, her movements mechanical, professional. But as her fingers circled his wrist, checking his pulse, she felt something that made her freeze. A squeeze. Deliberate. Unmistakable. Laura's breath caught. She looked at Marcus's face, searching for any sign of consciousness, a flutter of eyelids, a change in breathing pattern. His expression remained slack, peaceful, the face of a man lost to trauma-induced unconsciousness. But that squeeze hadn't been a reflex. It had been intentional, controlled, perfectly timed to the moment she'd touched his hand. Her mind raced through possibilities, fighting against hope and disbelief in equal measure. 15 years of critical care had taught her that the human nervous system could produce strange artifacts, involuntary responses that mimicked consciousness. But it had also taught her to recognize the difference between random neural firing and purposeful communication. Mr. Brooks, she whispered, her voice shaking slightly, if you can hear me, if you're aware, squeeze my hand once for yes. The second stretched into eternity. Then, one deliberate squeeze. Laura's eyes filled with tears. She immediately blinked away. Professional. Stay professional. She glanced at the door, making sure they were still alone, then leaned closer. Squeeze twice for no. 2 squeezes, distinct and clear. Oh my God, Laura breathed. You're awake. You've been awake, haven't you? And you're pretending to be in a coma. 1 squeeze, yes. Because you heard something. Someone said something that made you afraid to reveal your conscious. Another single squeeze. Laura's mind worked through the implications at lightning speed. If Marcus was faking his coma, he had a reason. And given what she'd discovered about his medications, that reason was probably that someone was trying to kill him. We need a better communication system, she said, her nurse's pragmatism taking over. 1 squeeze yes, 2 squeezes no, that's our foundation. But for more complex information, we'll use letters. I'll say the alphabet in groups. Squeeze when I hit the right group, then we'll narrow it down. It'll be slow, but it'll work. Marcus squeezed once, yes. For the next 20 minutes, painstakingly, Laura and Marcus built their secret language. She tested his range of motion, discovering he could manage small finger movements, subtle changes in grip pressure, even slight variations in his pulse that she could feel but the monitors couldn't detect. Over the next 48 hours, Laura became Marcus's voice, his eyes beyond that locked room, his connection to a world that believed him lost to unconsciousness. Their communication system evolved. She'd bring in cards during her assessments, ostensibly checking his visual tracking responses, but actually allowing Marcus to spell out words by indicating letters. To any observer, she was conducting neurological tests. In reality, they were strategizing his survival. The full scope of the conspiracy emerged in fragments, pieced together through patient spelling and Laura's increasingly dangerous investigations. Marcus's story unfolded in painful detail. Brooks Biomedical, built from nothing in a Detroit basement 20 years ago. His mother's death from cancer that could have been treatable if she'd had access to better medications. His life's work to develop a revolutionary treatment that targeted aggressive cancers with minimal side effects. And James and Diane's plan to sell it all to Apex Pharmaceuticals, a conglomerate known for acquiring promising drugs and pricing them into luxury territory. The treatment Marcus had created to honor his mother would become available only to the wealthy, exactly the outcome he'd spent decades fighting against. "That's why they need you gone," Laura said during a late-night session, her voice barely audible as she adjusted his the legitimate one, not the poison line. "Not just incapacitated. Actually dead or brain damaged beyond recovery. Because you'd never agree to the sale." One squeeze, yes. But it was Laura's investigation into the mysterious third-floor bag that revealed the full horror of their method. She'd smuggled a sample to a former colleague who worked in toxicology, claiming it was for a research project. The results came back 48 hours later, and Laura had to excuse herself to the bathroom to vomit after reading them. Sodium thiopental combined with a custom compound that mimicked stroke symptoms. Administered in small doses over time, it would cause progressive brain damage that would appear entirely consistent with Marcus's head trauma. The brilliant part, the absolutely diabolical part, was that it would make the coma real. Within another week, maybe two, Marcus wouldn't be faking unconsciousness anymore. He'd be genuinely brain damaged, lost in a fog his mind could never escape. Dr. Cole administers it himself, Laura spelled out for Marcus during her evening assessment, watching his heart rate spike slightly on the monitor, the only outward sign of his rage. During his routine checks, he adds it to your "I've been watching." He comes in around 10 p.m. every night, always alone, always with a syringe from his personal bag. She paused, meeting his closed eyes as if she could see through to the fury burning behind them. "Marcus, we're running out of time. The toxicology report estimates you've received 5 doses already. The neurological damage might already be starting. We need to act fast, but I don't know who to trust. If Dr. Cole is involved, how deep does this go? Hospital administration? The police? Your own board of directors?" Marcus's response came slowly, each letter a struggle against the sedative still in his system. "Vincent." "Vincent?" Laura repeated. "Who's Vincent?" "P.I., investigator, trusthim." Laura felt a surge of hope for the first time in days. "Where do I find him?" What followed was a series of elaborate instructions. Vincent Chase, former FBI agent, hired by Marcus 3 years ago after a corporate espionage attempt. He'd insisted Marcus keep a burner phone in a secure location, a safety deposit box at a bank downtown, under Laura's name now, added to the access list through Marcus's lawyer before the accident, a contingency Marcus had established when the threats first started. "You knew something was coming," Laura said softly. "You prepared for this." One squeeze, yes. But you didn't know it would be them. 2 squeezes, no. Even unconscious, Marcus's grief was palpable. That night, Laura left the hospital at midnight and drove to the bank, using the access codes Marcus had painstakingly spelled out. The deposit box contained the burner phone, a thick file of documents, and a handwritten note in Marcus's sharp handwriting. if you're reading this, I'm either dead or they've made their move. Call Vincent. Trust Patricia Owens. Trust no one else. Laura sat in her car in the empty parking lot and dialed the number Marcus had given her. Vincent Chase answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the late hour. "This is Vincent. My name is Laura Bennett," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I'm a nurse at Greystone Memorial Hospital. Marcus Brooks told me to call you. He's in danger, and I think we're the only two people who can save him." There was a pause, then, "Tell me everything." By the time she finished, dawn was breaking over the city. Vincent's response was immediate and decisive: "Don't go back to that hospital. They'll know you're suspicious. Give me 12 hours to gather evidence." But Laura was already shaking her head, though he couldn't see it. "I have to go back. If I disappear, they'll accelerate their timeline. Marcus needs someone inside, someone watching Dr. Cole's next move. I'm going back, Vincent. Just work fast." She hung up before he could argue, started her car, and drove back to Greystone Memorial. Back to Suite 407, where a man pretended to be dying while his body actually was. Back to the most dangerous game she'd ever played. Because some promises, once made, couldn't be broken. Even if keeping them cost everything. Vincent Chase had built a career on the principle that everyone left traces, digital footprints, financial breadcrumbs, communication patterns that revealed the truth beneath carefully constructed lies. 20 years with the FBI's white-collar crime division had taught him that the most elegant conspiracies always had the messiest executions. People got greedy. People got sloppy. People, inevitably, got caught. He'd been waiting for Laura's call for 3 days, ever since Marcus had triggered their emergency protocol, a single coded text sent from the burner phone before the accident, a message that simply read, "Wheels in motion. Going dark." Vincent had known then that Marcus's paranoia about James Whitmore had been justified. He just hadn't expected Diane to be involved, too. Now, sitting in his downtown office surrounded by multiple monitors, Vincent began pulling threads. He started with the obvious: financial records. James Whitmore's accounts showed nothing suspicious on the surface, a successful executive living well but not extravagantly. But Vincent knew the real money always hid in the shadows, in offshore structures and shell corporations designed to obfuscate ownership. He found the first account in the Cayman Islands within 2 hours. A company called Apex Holdings LLC, established 3 months ago, with James Whitmore listed as a principal. Deeper digging revealed Diane Brooks as a secondary signatory. The account had received a wire transfer of $2 million 2 weeks before Marcus's accident, a good faith payment, Vincent recognized, the kind that sealed deals and ensured cooperation. The source of that payment led him straight to Apex Pharmaceuticals. "There it is," Vincent muttered, screenshotting the transaction history. The 30 pieces of silver. But financial evidence alone wouldn't save Marcus. They needed proof of the murder attempt itself, proof that would hold up in court and couldn't be dismissed as circumstantial. Vincent turned his attention to communications, hacking into James's email through a backdoor Marcus had insisted they install in the company's system years ago, another contingency that had seemed paranoid at the time but proved prescient now. The emails were damning. Correspondence between James and someone identified only as R.C. Raymond Cole, Vincent assumed, the Dr. Laura had mentioned. The messages used careful language, corporate speak that could be explained away in isolation, but together formed a clear pattern. References to accelerating the timeline, ensuring permanent resolution, and maintaining therapeutic protocols until transition complete. The most chilling email had been sent just yesterday. Subject is showing unexpected resistance. May need to adjust dosage significantly. Will handle personally during evening rounds. Vincent forwarded everything to an encrypted server, creating multiple backups. Then he turned to the hardest part, Diane Brooks. Marcus's wife of 12 years, the woman who'd stood beside him at charity galas and corporate events, who'd smiled for cameras and played the role of supportive spouse while apparently planning her husband's murder. Her records revealed a different story than the public image suggested. A 2-year affair with James Whitmore, confirmed by hotel receipts and text messages Vincent recovered from her cloud backup. Credit card statements showing purchases that spoke of a woman preparing for a new life, a beach house in Costa Rica, paid in cash through a shell company. Flight bookings for 2 to Grand Cayman, scheduled for 3 days after the Brooks Biomedical Board meeting. They'd been planning this for years, Vincent realized. The affair, the offshore accounts, the Apex deal, all of it carefully orchestrated. The accident had simply been the trigger, the event that set their endgame in motion. By hour 10, Vincent had assembled a comprehensive dossier that tracked money, communications, and movements. He had proof of conspiracy, proof of financial motive, and proof of intent. What he didn't have yet was direct evidence of the poisoning itself, the smoking gun that connected Dr. Cole's therapeutic protocols to actual attempted murder. That would require Laura's inside access and one very dangerous gambit. Vincent called her back at noon. "I've got enough to bury them financially," he said without preamble. "But we need video evidence of Dr. Cole administering the unauthorized medication. Can you get a camera into that room?" "I can do better," Laura replied, her voice steady despite the obvious exhaustion. "I can get a blood sample before and after his next dose. Document the exact moment Cole administers it, then prove what he gave Marcus through lab analysis. It'll be irrefutable. Laura, if they catch you." "They won't. Marcus and I have a system. We've got this." Vincent heard the determination in her voice and recognized it, the sound of someone who'd made a choice and wouldn't be talked out of it. He'd heard it in his own voice 1,000 times over his career, usually right before doing something spectacularly dangerous. "All right," he said. "But I'm coming to you. I'll be at the hospital tonight, posing as Marcus's cousin from out of town. If something goes wrong, you'll have backup. And if something goes right? Then we gather enough evidence to send all 3 of them to prison for the rest of their lives," Vincent said grimly. "And we save Marcus Brooks before his fake coma becomes a real grave." He spent the afternoon assembling his approach strategy, coordinating with Patricia Owens, Marcus's CFO and the only board member Marcus had flagged as trustworthy, and preparing the legal documentation they'd need once they made their move. Everything hinged on the next 12 hours. By this time tomorrow, Marcus would either be saved or he'd be lost forever, his brilliant mind destroyed by the people he trusted most. Vincent checked his weapon, a habit from his FBI days, though he hoped this would be resolved with evidence rather than force, and headed for Greystone Memorial Hospital. The endgame had begun, and there would be no second chances. In Suite 407, Marcus Brooks lay motionless, his consciousness sharp as broken glass, waiting for nightfall and Dr. Raymond Cole's routine visit. Waiting for the moment when the hunter would become the prey, and silence would finally give way to judgment. The resurrection was coming. They just didn't know it yet. The trap began to tighten on Tuesday morning when James Whitmore appeared at Laura's nursing station, his smile perfectly calibrated to suggest friendly concern while his eyes conducted surveillance. Laura had just returned from her break, her burner phone, Vincent's secure line, hidden in her locker, her nerves stretched to their breaking point after 3 nearly sleepless nights. "Ms. Bennett?" James's voice carried that smooth corporate warmth that probably charmed board members and closed deals. Up close, Laura could see what had attracted Diane, the expensive suit, the confident bearing, the surface charm that concealed something calculating underneath. "I wanted to personally thank you for the exceptional care you've been providing my partner. Marcus is like a brother to me." Brother. The word hung between them, grotesque in its irony. "Just doing my job, Mr. Whitmore." Laura kept her tone professional, her expression neutral. "Mr. Brooks is stable, all things considered." "Yes, about that." James leaned against the counter, casualness that didn't reach his eyes. "I've noticed you've been spending considerable time with him. More than the other nurses on rotation." The night supervisor mentioned you've been conducting extra neurological assessments. Laura's pulse quickened, but 15 years of critical care had taught her to function under pressure. Mr. Brooks is a complex case. I like to be thorough. Thorough. Of course. James's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind it. Still, we wouldn't want you to burn out. You've been taking on extra shifts, coming in on your days off. That kind of dedication, while admirable, can lead to mistakes. Exhaustion clouds judgment. The threat was clear even wrapped in concern. Laura met his gaze steadily. I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of managing my workload. I'm sure you are. James straightened, buttoning his jacket with deliberate precision. Still, I think I'll have a word with Dr. Cole. Perhaps we should rotate nursing staff more frequently. Fresh eyes, you understand. For Marcus's benefit, of course. He walked away before Laura could respond, leaving her standing at the nursing station with dread pooling in her stomach. Within an hour, she was summoned to Dr. Cole's office. The hospital administrator sat behind an imposing desk, Marcus's chart open in front of him. Raymond Cole was in his early 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, the kind of doctor whose reputation commanded respect and whose position made challenging him professionally suicidal. Nurse Bennett. He didn't invite her to sit. I'm concerned about your recent behavior regarding the Brooks case. You've been requesting medication records outside your usual scope, conducting unauthorized assessments, and showing an unusual degree of personal investment in the patient's care. I've noticed irregularities in his treatment protocol, Laura said carefully. As his primary night nurse, I felt obligated to investigate. What you felt obligated to do, Dr. Cole interrupted, his voice hardening, was follow the treatment plan established by qualified physicians. Your job is to administer care, not to question medical decisions made by doctors with decades more experience than you possess. With respect, sir, the dosages don't match. Enough. Cole stood, his imposing frame meant to intimidate. Effective immediately, you're removed from Mr. Brooks's care team. You're being reassigned to the surgical recovery ward. A nurse named Michelle Torres will take over the Brooks case. She's very experienced and, importantly, understands the value of following protocols without question. Laura felt her world tilting. Michelle Torres, she knew the name. A nurse with a reputation for being highly skilled but equally unquestioning, the kind of medical professional who did exactly what doctors ordered and never made waves. The kind who wouldn't notice poison being administered, or would look the other way if she did. Dr. Cole, please. I'm not trying to cause problems. I just want to make sure Mr. Brooks receives appropriate care. Your concern has been noted and is no longer needed. Take the rest of the day off. Report to surgical recovery tomorrow morning. He returned to his paperwork, dismissing her. That will be all, Nurse Bennett. Laura walked out of his office on shaking legs, her mind racing. She made it to the stairwell before pulling out her phone and calling Vincent. They know, she said without preamble. Or they suspect. I've been taken off Marcus's case. Vincent's response was immediate. Don't go back to that room. They'll be watching. I'll handle this. You don't understand. They're replacing me with someone who won't ask questions. Without me monitoring his they can increase the dosage without anyone noticing. Vincent, they're going to accelerate the timeline. They're going to kill him faster now, before we can expose them. She heard Vincent exhale, the sound of a man calculating rapidly diminishing options. Then we move tonight. I've got Patricia Owen standing by with legal counsel. We're going to need hard evidence of the poisoning. I can get it, Laura said. One more visit. I'll say I'm collecting my personal items from his room. That'll give me enough time to take a final blood sample and document what's in his current for. But Vincent, we need to move him tonight. Once that new nurse takes over. I know. I'll arrange a medical transport, have a legitimate doctor standing by to receive him at a different facility. But Laura, this is it. If they catch you in that room after being officially removed from his care, they'll have you arrested for patient interference. I don't care, Laura said simply. I made him a promise. I'm seeing this through. She hung up and made her way back to the ICU, her badge still granting her access for another few hours until the official reassignment processed through the system. The floor was relatively quiet, the afternoon shift change creating brief windows of reduced supervision. Laura grabbed an empty supply bag, giving her an excuse to enter suite 407, and pushed through the door. Marcus lay exactly as she'd left him that morning, monitors beeping steadily, his expression peaceful. But as she approached his bed, she saw the slightest tension around his eyes. He'd heard everything, she realized, had been listening to James's veiled threats and Cole's dismissal of her concerns, and understood what it meant. I know you heard, Laura whispered, moving to his 4 lines. They're accelerating. But so are we. She worked quickly, drawing a blood sample from his arm, documenting the exact contents of each 4 bag with her phone's camera. Vincent's arranging your transport out of here. Tonight, Marcus. By midnight, you'll be out of their reach. 1 finger squeeze, yes. But there was another movement, a more urgent pattern that spelled out, danger. I know it's dangerous. N-O-Y-O-U, danger. Laura froze, understanding flooding through her. Marcus wasn't worried about himself. He was worried about her. I'll be fine, she said, though her voice shook slightly. I'm a nurse, remember. We're trained to handle difficult situations. T-N-K-Y-O-U, Marcus spelled out slowly. Then, more emphatically, T-R-U-S-T-D-W-R-O-N-G-P-O-P-L-E, Y-O-U Laura felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. No time for emotion. She squeezed his hand once, acknowledgement, solidarity, a promise they'd both keep. She was almost to the door when it opened. Michelle Torres stood in the threshold, her expression curious and slightly suspicious. Laura? I thought you'd been reassigned. Just collecting my things, Laura said, holding up the empty supply bag as cover. Wanted to say goodbye to my patients. Michelle stepped inside, her gaze sweeping the room, lingering on Marcus's monitors, his 4 lines. Dr. Cole mentioned you'd been overly invested in this case. Said I should watch for any irregularities. The words were casual, but the subtext was clear. Michelle had been briefed to look for sabotage, for any evidence that Laura had been interfering with Marcus's treatment. She was there to ensure the conspiracy could continue without complications. You won't find any, Laura said evenly. I follow protocols. Always. She walked past Michelle, out of suite 407, down the corridor toward the elevators. She didn't look back. Didn't let herself think about Marcus lying in that room, about to be left alone with people who'd been instructed to look the other way while poison dripped into his veins. Instead, she thought about tonight. About Vincent's plan, Patricia Owens's legal team, and the window of opportunity they had before the board vote on Thursday. About hard evidence and federal agents and justice delayed but finally arriving. She thought about resurrection and reckoning and a billionaire playing dead who was about to remind the world why he'd never lost a battle that truly mattered. The game had entered its final phase. And Marcus Brooks was done playing defense. Time to burn it all down. Vincent Chase stood in the parking garage beneath Greystone Memorial Hospital at 9 p.m., his breath misting in the cool evening air, his phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated what might be the most complicated extraction he'd ever attempted. Patricia, I need you to listen carefully. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., you're going to call an emergency press conference at Brooks Biomedical Headquarters. The official statement is that you're announcing Marcus's death and the board's unanimous decision to accept Apex's acquisition offer. Patricia Owens's voice came through sharp and controlled, the CFO who'd spent 20 years managing crisis situations. They'll actually show up. Diane and James will buy it. They'll buy it because it's exactly what they want to hear. James has been pushing for this board meeting since the accident. The announcement of Marcus's death gives them the legal authority they need. Diane inherits his shares as his widow, James assumes operational control, and Apex gets its prize. Except Marcus isn't dead. Except Marcus isn't dead, Vincent confirmed. He's going to be walking through those conference room doors right as James presents the acquisition terms. We'll have every major news outlet present, dozens of witnesses, and federal agents positioned throughout the building. They won't be able to deny anything, won't be able to spin their way out. Vincent, can he even walk? Laura said the poison has been affecting his motor control, his strength. If he collapses mid-reveal, then we have a legitimate doctor on standby to stabilize him, and the dramatic impact is even stronger. But Laura thinks he can do it. She's been working with him over the past 2 nights, helping him rebuild muscle strength in secret. The man's stubborn as hell, Patricia. He'll make it to that podium if he has to crawl. There was a pause, then Patricia's voice came back softer. He's really been conscious this whole time. Playing dead while they plotted his murder. For 6 days. Listening to every word, documenting every betrayal. The recordings alone would send them to prison. But Marcus wants more than justice. He wants the world to see exactly who they are and what they tried to do. Then let's give him his resurrection. Vincent hung up and turned to find Laura approaching from the hospital entrance, her nursing scrubs replaced by dark clothes, a medical bag slung over her shoulder. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with determined focus. "He's ready," she said. "I snuck in through the service entrance after Michelle's shift change. Marcus has been practicing movement when the monitors show minimal supervision. His muscle control is better than I expected, but Vincent, the toxin damage is real. He's fighting through pain with every movement. I don't know how long he can maintain the facade. He just needs to hold it together for tomorrow morning. 12 hours, then he can collapse into legitimate medical care and never have to pretend again." Vincent checked his watch. "The transport ambulance will be here in 20 minutes. Legitimate crew, legitimate medical equipment. We're transferring him to Mercy General across town, where Dr. Sarah Chen is waiting. She's been briefed on the poisoning protocol and has the antidote compounds ready." "How did you get authorization for a transfer without alerting Dr. Cole?" Vincent smiled grimly. "I didn't. We're kidnapping him from his own hospital room. Patricia's lawyers are prepared to argue medical necessity and patient advocacy if charges are filed. But by the time anyone realizes Marcus is gone, the press conference will be underway and none of this will matter." Laura pulled out her phone, showing Vincent a video she'd recorded that afternoon. "Before Michelle Torres took over, I managed to get this. Dr. Cole entering Marcus's room at 10 p.m., administering medication from an unlabeled syringe directly into his foreport. The timestamp matches his official rounds, but there's no record of this medication in Marcus's chart. Combined with the blood samples showing toxin levels increasing after each of Cole's visits, it's irrefutable proof." "You're either incredibly brave or completely insane," Vincent said. "Possibly both," says the former FBI agent conducting an illegal medical extraction. They shared a brief smile, 2 people who'd become unlikely allies in the most dangerous gambit of their lives. Then Vincent's expression sobered. "Laura, you need to understand what you're walking into tomorrow. You'll be standing next to Marcus when he makes his reveal, your face on every news channel, your involvement in this conspiracy exposure documented for the world to see. Dr. Cole will argue you manipulated a brain-damaged patient, that you fabricated evidence, that you violated every ethical standard of nursing practice. Your career will be scrutinized, your reputation questioned. There will be lawsuits, investigations, maybe even criminal charges before this is sorted out." Laura met his gaze steadily. "I know. I've thought about nothing else for days. But Vincent, I watched my ex-husband prioritize his career over every principle he claimed to believe in. I'm not making that mistake. Some things are more important than job security. Marcus trusted me when he had no reason to trust anyone. I'm not abandoning him now. The ambulance pulled out of Greystone Memorial Hospital at 10:47 p.m., its lights activating only once they'd cleared the property. Inside, Marcus Brooks opened his eyes fully for the first time in 6 days, his gaze finding Laura's in the dim interior. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse from disuse but clear. "You saved my life." "You're not safe yet," Laura replied. "Tomorrow, we finish this." At Mercy General, Dr. Chen began the antidote protocol immediately, for lines delivering compounds designed to neutralize the neurotoxin and repair as much damage as possible. Marcus would be weak, his coordination compromised, his body fighting through the effects of a week-long poisoning. But his mind, his brilliant, calculating, furiously angry mind, remained sharp as ever. They had 12 hours to prepare him for the performance of his life. 12 hours before Marcus Brooks would rise from the dead and drag his betrayers into the light. In Suite 407 at Greystone Memorial, Michelle Torres returned from her break to find an empty bed and chaos erupting around her. Dr. Cole was called, hospital security activated, frantic calls made to James Whitmore and Diane Brooks. But it was too late. Their prize had vanished, their timeline shattered, their careful conspiracy unraveling with every passing minute. And across town, in a secure hospital room surrounded by people he could actually trust, Marcus Brooks practiced standing, practiced walking, practiced the speech he'd deliver to the world. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., the dead would speak. And when they did, the reckoning would be absolute. The conference room at Brooks Biomedical headquarters filled with a tension that buzzed like electrical current through expensive air. News crews positioned cameras while financial journalists claimed front-row seats. Apex Pharmaceuticals executives sat clustered near the presentation screen, their expressions carefully neutral but their body language radiating satisfaction. Board members filed and looking appropriately somber, most unaware they were attending theater rather than a funeral. Diane Brooks stood at the podium in a black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, her makeup carefully applied to suggest grief while remaining camera-ready. James Whitmore sat behind her, his expression grave, his hands folded in a gesture of respectful mourning. To the assembled crowd, they were the picture of personal tragedy bravely conducting necessary business. Only Patricia Owens, watching from the side of the room, knew they were watching a performance by people who just lost control of their own script. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming during this difficult time." Diane's voice carried the perfect blend of sorrow and strength. "As you know, my husband Marcus Brooks suffered catastrophic injuries in a terrible accident last week. Despite the heroic efforts of his medical team, I'm heartbroken to announce that Marcus passed away peacefully last night at 9:47 p.m. A murmur ran through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Reporters began typing. Diane paused, allowing the moment its weight, her hand moving to her throat in a gesture of composed grief. Marcus dedicated his life to Brooks Biomedical and to the revolutionary cancer treatment that bears his mother's name. In his final weeks, before the accident, he and I discussed the future of this company and his wish that his work reach as many patients as possible. After careful consideration and consultation with our board, we've decided to honor Marcus's vision by accepting an acquisition offer from Apex Pharmaceuticals, ensuring his legacy will continue on a global scale. James stood, moving to the podium with a leather portfolio. The board has unanimously approved this merger, which will be finalized pending completion of legal documentation. Apex has committed to maintaining Brooks Biomedical's research priorities while providing the resources necessary to bring Marcus's cancer treatment to market worldwide. At prices only the wealthy can afford, Patricia thought bitterly. Everything Marcus spent 20 years fighting against. One of the Apex executives began to stand, ready to deliver prepared remarks about the synergy of the merger and their commitment to innovation. Diane turned to shake his hand, her smile warm, her performance flawless. The conference room doors opened. Every head turned. Cameras swiveled. The murmur of conversation died instantly. Marcus Brooks walked into the room. He moved slowly, supported by Laura Bennett on his left side and Patricia Owens on his right, his steps careful but deliberate. He was dressed in a dark suit that hung slightly loose on his frame, evidence of the weight he'd lost during his ordeal. His face showed the strain of a man fighting through pain with every movement. But his eyes burned with an intensity that made several people in the front row actually lean back in their seats. Behind him walked Vincent Chase, a man most of them had never seen but whose bearing screamed law enforcement, and Dr. Sarah Chen, who moved with the confident authority of someone prepared to catch Marcus if he fell. Diane's face went white. James froze mid-gesture, his hand still extended toward the apex executive. For 3 perfect seconds, nobody moved, the entire room suspended in collective shock. Then chaos erupted. "Marcus!" Someone in the press corps shouted. Cameras began clicking in a frenzy. Reporters surged forward. The apex executives looked at each other in confusion, then at James and Diane with dawning suspicion. Marcus reached the podium, his hands gripping its edges for support. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse but carried through the suddenly silent room. "Reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated." A shocked laugh rippled through the crowd. Diane had stumbled backward, her hand pressed to her chest as if she might actually faint. James had recovered slightly, his expression shifting to confused concern. "Marcus, my God, what are you doing here? You should be in the hospital. You're clearly not well. Someone call an ambulance." "Don't bother, James. I've had enough of hospitals for a while. Especially ones where the doctors are trying to kill me." Marcus gestured to Laura and Patricia. "These women saved my life. My nurse, Laura Bennett, discovered that someone was poisoning me through my four with a neurotoxin designed to cause permanent brain damage. My CFO, Patricia Owens, arranged legal protection when hospital administration tried to silence her. And Vincent Chase, my private investigator, gathered the evidence that's about to destroy everything you and my wife built on my grave." The room exploded with noise, reporters shouting questions, apex executives rising from their seats in alarm, board members demanding explanations. But Marcus raised his hand, and something in his expression commanded silence. "For 6 days, I laid in that hospital bed, fully conscious, listening to every word spoken in my room. I heard my wife and my business partner discuss how long they'd need to keep me comfortable before the board would approve my incapacity. I heard Dr. Raymond Cole assure them the neurotoxin would make my coma real within 2 weeks, leaving me genuinely brain damaged and legally incompetent. I heard them celebrate their upcoming sale to Apex, their offshore accounts, their plans for a new life built on the ashes of everything I created." Vincent stepped forward, handing Marcus a tablet. Marcus pressed play, and his voice, recorded during one of his covert conversations with Laura, filled the room. On Tuesday, October 15, at approximately 10 p.m., Dr. Raymond Cole entered my room and administered an unlabeled medication directly into my foreline. This medication does not appear on my official chart. Blood samples taken before and after this administration show a 47% increase in sodium thiopental and a custom neurotoxin compound in my system. Similar administrations occurred every night for 6 consecutive nights, each one documented by Nurse Bennett and verified by independent toxicology analysis. The audio continued, playing recordings of Diane and James's whispered conversations, Dr. Cole's phone calls with Apex representatives, financial transfers documented by Vincent's investigation. By the time the recordings ended, several board members had their phones out, clearly calling lawyers. The Apex executives were conferring urgently among themselves. And Diane was crying, real tears now, the performance finally broken. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "Marcus, you were never here. Always working, always building, always focused on the next project. I was alone in our marriage for years. So you decided to kill me?" Marcus's voice cut through her justification like a blade. "You couldn't just divorce me, couldn't just walk away with your settlement and start fresh. You had to conspire with my business partner, seduce him into a plan that would steal my company, corrupt my mother's legacy, and leave me either dead or brain damaged. James finally moved, stepping away from the podium, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Marcus, you're clearly traumatized, confused from the accident and the medications. None of this is what it seems. We were trying to help you, to protect the company while you recovered. Then explain the offshore accounts. Vincent's voice was flat, prosecutorial. Explain the $2 million payment from Apex to your shell corporation 3 days before Marcus's brakes failed. Explain the emails between you and Dr. Cole discussing permanent resolution and accelerated protocols. Explain why you booked flights to Grand Cayman for the day after this press conference. The silence that followed was absolute. Then the conference room doors opened again, and federal agents in FBI windbreakers entered, led by a woman who walked straight to James Whitmore. James Whitmore, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, fraud, and corporate espionage. Diane Brooks, Raymond Cole, you're also under arrest on the same charges. The agent began reading Miranda rights while her team moved to handcuff all 3 conspirators. Diane was sobbing openly now, her careful makeup running down her face. James maintained his composure until the handcuffs clicked shut, then something in his expression finally cracked. You're going to regret this, Marcus. The board will never approve your restructuring plans. Apex will tie you up in lawsuits for years. You've won the battle but lost the war. The board, Patricia interrupted, stepping forward with her own tablet, has already approved Marcus's restructuring proposal. I called an emergency vote last night, with full disclosure of the conspiracy and Marcus's survival. The vote was unanimous. Brooks Biomedical is now a public benefit corporation, legally obligated to provide cancer treatment at cost to underserved communities. You're not just going to prison, James. You're going to watch from your cell while Marcus implements every social program you spent 2 years trying to prevent. As federal agents escorted the conspirators out, Marcus turned to face the cameras and reporters still present. Brooks Biomedical was built on a promise I made to my mother as she died from a cancer that should have been treatable. She couldn't afford the medications that might have saved her life. I swore that no one else would face that choice, life or bankruptcy. Over the past few years, I lost sight of that promise. I let profit margins and market share cloud the original mission. My near-death experience has reminded me what actually matters. He paused, gathering strength, his hands still gripping the podium but his voice gaining power. Effective immediately, the treatment my team developed, the one Apex wanted to price at $400,000 per patient, will be available on a sliding scale based on ability to pay. No one will be denied treatment due to cost. Furthermore, I'm establishing the Healing Equity Initiative, a foundation dedicated to making life-saving treatments accessible to underserved communities worldwide. We'll start in Detroit, where I grew up, in neighborhoods where kids still watch their parents die from treatable diseases because they can't afford care. The reporters erupted with questions, but Marcus raised his hand one final time. I'll take questions later. Right now, I need to return to medical supervision and let Dr. Chen ensure the poison hasn't caused permanent damage. But I want to say one more thing. My wife and business partner tried to kill me because they believed I was weak, isolated, easy to eliminate. They forgot that I built this company by surviving circumstances that should have destroyed me. They forgot that the people who matter, Patricia, Laura, Vincent, and the researchers who actually believe in our mission, will always be more powerful than those motivated only by greed. Some legacies can't be bought, stolen, or poisoned. Some promises don't die just because the person who made them almost does. He stepped away from the podium, his legs finally giving out, caught by Laura and Patricia before he could fall. Dr. Chen moved in immediately, checking his vital signs, her expression concerned but controlled. "Get him out of here," she said. "He's done enough." They supported Marcus from the conference room, leaving behind a stunned silence that erupted into frantic activity the moment the doors closed. News of the resurrection spread through social media in minutes, Marcus Brooks's face trending worldwide within the hour. Stock in Apex Pharmaceuticals plummeted as investors realized the scandal they'd almost purchased. And in holding cells across the city, 3 people who'd thought they were untouchable began to understand the true price of betrayal. In the ambulance taking Marcus back to Mercy General, he looked at Laura and Patricia and Vincent, and finally allowed himself to smile. "Thank you," he said simply. "All of you. For believing I was worth saving." "You were never the one who needed saving, Marcus," Laura replied. "The world needed you alive. We just made sure it got you back." Marcus closed his eyes, exhaustion finally claiming him, secure in the knowledge that for the first time in 6 days, sleep meant recovery rather than danger. The resurrection was complete. Now the real work, the work of healing and rebuilding and fulfilling promises, could finally begin. 6 months later, Marcus Brooks stood in a renovated warehouse in Detroit's Brightmoor neighborhood, watching contractors put finishing touches on what would become the first Healing Equity Initiative clinic. Sunlight streamed through industrial windows, illuminating examination rooms equipped with state-of-the-art medical technology, waiting areas designed for dignity rather than efficiency, and a pharmacy stocked with medications provided at cost. He'd gained back the weight he'd lost, his strength fully recovered thanks to Dr. Chen's aggressive rehabilitation protocol. The toxin damage had been partially reversible, he still got occasional tremors in his right hand, still had moments of dizziness that required medication, but his mind remained sharp, his purpose clearer than it had ever been. Patricia Owens had stepped into the CEO role seamlessly, managing Brooks Biomedical's transformation from a traditional pharmaceutical company into something unprecedented in the industry. Profit still mattered, but they served the mission now rather than defining it. The cancer treatment had been approved by the FDA and was being manufactured at scale, priced on a sliding model that made it accessible to everyone who needed it. The conspiracy trials had concluded 3 weeks ago. Diane Brooks received 15 years for attempted murder and conspiracy. James Whitmore got 25. Dr. Raymond Cole, as the medical professional who'd actually administered the poison, received 30 years and permanent revocation of his medical license. Their appeals were already in motion, but Marcus didn't spend much time thinking about them anymore. They'd chosen their path. He'd chosen his. Laura Bennett entered the clinic carrying 2 coffee cups, her expression showing the contentment of someone who'd finally found work that aligned with her values. As Director of Patient Advocacy for the Healing Equity Initiative, she'd spent the past 6 months building protocols to ensure every patient received not just medical treatment but support navigating the complex healthcare system. Her nursing license had been fully cleared after an ethics board investigation concluded she'd acted appropriately under extraordinary circumstances. 3 hospitals had already tried to recruit her back. She'd declined them all. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing Marcus a cup. "The contractors say we'll be ready for the grand opening next week. Mayor's office wants to attend, bring some press coverage. Let them come." Marcus sipped the coffee, mediocre hospital cafeteria quality that Laura insisted on drinking out of solidarity with overworked medical staff everywhere. "The more attention we get, the more patients we reach." They stood together watching workers install the final pieces of equipment, 2 people who'd met under the worst circumstances and somehow become partners in something transformative. "I've been thinking about writing a book," Laura said after a moment. "About the experience, about what happened. Not for money or attention, but because healthcare workers need to know they can trust their instincts when something feels wrong. That fighting for patients' lives is always worth the professional risk." "You should write it," Marcus encouraged. "Your story saved my life. It might save others too." His phone buzzed, a text from his daughter Sophie, his youngest child. The relationship had been strained for years before the accident, his workaholic tendencies creating distance even as he provided material security. But 6 months of intensive family therapy and genuine presence had begun repairing what his obsession with building had damaged. Sophie's text was simple: "Proud of you, Dad. Mom would be too. Mom." His mother, whose death from treatable cancer had launched him on this path 45 years ago. Everything he'd built had been in her memory, even when he'd lost sight of the purpose behind the building. Marcus looked around the clinic, this space that would soon serve the neighborhood where he'd grown up, where kids would no longer watch their parents suffer without hope of treatment. This was the promise fulfilled. This was the legacy that mattered. Ready for the final walkthrough? Laura asked. They moved through the clinic together, examining rooms and greeting contractors, discussing patient flow and medication storage and the 1,000 practical details that separated good intentions from effective action. In the cancer treatment wing, named the Eleanor Brooks Memorial Center after Marcus's mother, they paused at a plaque Laura had commissioned. Some promises don't die just because the person who made them almost does. Marcus's own words, spoken in that press conference 6 months ago, now permanently mounted as the clinic's founding principle. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been your nurse that night? Laura asked quietly. If they'd assigned someone else, someone who wouldn't have noticed the irregularities? Every day, Marcus admitted. I think about all the variables that had to align perfectly for me to survive. Your medical ethics background. Your willingness to trust your instincts over authority. The fact that I'd hired Vincent years earlier. Patricia's integrity. Every piece had to fall into place exactly right, or I'd be dead and Apex would own everything I'd built. Maybe it wasn't just luck, Laura suggested. Maybe the universe has a sense of justice. Maybe people who build things that matter get second chances. Or maybe, Marcus countered gently, people who care enough to fight for what's right create their own justice. Either way, I'm grateful. They completed the walkthrough and returned to the main entrance, where afternoon sunlight painted the waiting room in warm gold. Next week, this space would fill with patients, people who needed help, people who deserved dignity, people his mother never had the chance to become. Marcus's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Vincent. Apex filed for bankruptcy protection this morning. Shareholders voted out entire executive board. Their cancer research division is being liquidated. Several former researchers asking if Brooks Biomedical is hiring. Marcus smiled and showed the message to Laura. Karma worked slowly, but it worked. Should we hire them? Laura asked. The researchers who actually did the science. Absolutely. The executives who priced their discoveries out of reach. They can find other employment. As they prepared to leave, locking the clinic behind them until the grand opening, Marcus paused at the entrance for one final look. This building represented everything the conspiracy had tried to prevent: accessible healthcare, social mission over profit margins, legacy measured in lives saved rather than stock prices. And it existed because a nurse had trusted her instincts, a CFO had risked her career, a private investigator had refused to quit, and a man pretending to be comatose had used silence as his most powerful weapon. Some stories end with revenge. This one ended with resurrection, not just of a man who'd been left for dead, but of a promise made to a dying mother 45 years earlier. A promise that had survived conspiracy, poison, betrayal, and the absolute worst of human greed. Brooks Biomedical's new slogan, designed by Patricia and approved unanimously by the board, appeared on the clinic's windows: healthcare is a human right, not a luxury. Marcus Brooks, the man who'd built a pharmaceutical empire, lost it to conspirators, and reclaimed it from the edge of death, finally understood what his mother had tried to teach him all those years ago: the true measure of success isn't what you accumulate. It's what you give away. It's who you become when every advantage is stripped away and all that remains is your principles and your promises. He'd almost lost everything to remember that lesson. But now, standing in front of a clinic that would treat thousands of patients who otherwise would have gone without care, Marcus knew the price had been worth paying. The resurrection was complete. The work of healing, both personal and systemic, was just beginning. And this time, he wouldn't lose sight of what actually mattered. This time, the promise would endure, protected by people who understood that some legacies are worth more than any fortune, more than any empire, more than life itself. Some promises are kept not because they're easy, but because they're right. Eleanor Brooks would have been proud.